guys, so today I'm going to be reviewing Kelly Link's collection of short stories, Get in Trouble. I do not have my hardcover copy of this anymore because it was never mine. If you've seen either like our 30 Seconds to Disagree video on that book, then you may know that that was Taylor's copy and I had had that book for like a million years and I needed to give it back to him. So I have notes instead of the hardcover, but of course in editing you will already be seeing the cover of it, and so you know what it is when you see it. If you saw our Bibliomancy for Beginners episode on the Magic for Beginners short story collection that Kelly Link produced a while ago now, then you know that I was not a fan of her style. Her style is it's magical realism on steroids. The amount of fantastical ideas that she has per even sentence in a short story is 300, 400, 10,000% more than you would see in a normal magical realism story. And I'm not always a fan of that because I felt like Magic for Beginners, there wasn't a lot of like cohesive storytelling. It was just fantastical elements placed on top of each other and it wasn't so great. That was not the case with Get in Trouble, which is why Taylor had been so insistent that I read this new collection, because I felt like there were a lot more cohesive stories in this collection, and so opposed to Magic for Beginners, which I think I gave 3 or 2 stars, I gave Get in Trouble 4. And that's a really big deal for me. That means that there was definitely something in this that I connected to really strongly. This collection is actually a pretty thick book. It's like about that big, but there aren't that many stories in it. The stories are all just pretty long stories. And so there's The Summer People, I Can See Right Through You, Secret Identity, Valley of the Girls, Origin Story, The Lesson, The New Boyfriend, Two Houses, and Light. Thank you, notes. So that is only 9 stories, which compared to Magic for Beginners, when there were some that were really short and some that were really long, and it had a lot more, I think, in it, but I think that that extra time with the stories was really, really good. And I liked that a lot more. My top 2 were The Lesson and I Can See Right Through You. The Lesson was a story about 2 gay men who are thinking about having a kid, but in true, Kelly Link style, it's about so much more than that. It really gets fantastical. And it was one of those things where the ending comes together and you think that it almost feels like, it is titled The Lesson, and you are expecting that moral of the story, but it's the kind of story where as you're reading through it, you realize that the moral isn't anything like you think it's going to be, and instead of having this kind of, I don't know, uplifting ending in a way, it's like just this ending that just punches you right in the feels, and not in like a despairing way, but just that way where you're just like, your emotions, just all of them are sucker punched. And that was the first one that Taylor had me read, and I just, that was like the cohesive emotional punch that I've been missing, I think, in a lot of her earlier stories that I'd read. And I got it from that story. And that is also why I liked I Can See Right Through You. And this is a story about a famous actor and actress who had been together but weren't anymore, but he was still in love with her. But it's like, it sounds kind of like a soap opera, but there's this issue of like the demon lover that they may or may not have summoned from a Ouija board. And that ending sucker punched me in the creepy way. It was one of those things where I actually had to close the book and think about what I had read, and because it's a kind of ending that I wouldn't call it necessarily a twist ending, because you've been paying attention, you can see it coming, but it's that kind of thing where the details pile up and then the ending happens and you're like, what? And so I loved that one too. I rarely ever have emotional reactions to things that I read. I'm a pretty stoic reader. But that was just literally closed the book, sat there. Yeah. Really, really good story. Some of the things that kept this from being a 5-star book was a lack of ending, and not necessarily even in the way that I didn't like the lack of ending in Magic for Beginners, because some of those lacks of ending were purposeful and I just don't like that style, but this was like unsatisfactory endings. Like the first story, The Summer People, I love that story, and then there's this weird break at the end and this little page that literally feels like it was appended as an afterthought, and somehow that's the ending as opposed to the ending before the break, which would have actually been satisfying. And other things like that, other stories that just kind of go and peter out There are 2 superhero-based stories in this. Both of them have very interesting ideas, but one of them is far more successful than the other one. And because Secret Identity is so much more successful than Origin Story, I was just curious even why Origin Story was in there in the first place, because it was just boring. And so stuff like that. So while there were a couple of great stories, some good stories, there were enough meh stories, and again, we're only talking about 9, so again, that kind of skews it, but that just either were boring, or just had this great idea and then were disappointing in the end, which is actually harder for me to, takes a harder toll on my rating. But overall, I loved this a lot more than I liked Magic for Beginners, and I think that if you love Kelly Link, I personally feel like her style is definitely getting more mature and interesting and cohesive in a story-ish way, which is what I needed from her writing. So definitely recommend this if you did or didn't like Kelly Link in the past. Pick this up if you saw anything promising in her writing whatsoever, and I don't think that you will be disappointed. Thanks, guys. Bye.